Bush would hit running when he took over in 2000 or 2001. This is something that I would certainly urge that the Obama campaign be focusing on now and focusing on very seriously. Now let me take a couple issues that I think that they should have particular focus on. First of all, there's no question that the presidency has changed during the Bush administration, the likes of which my former president, Richard Nixon, initiated the early changes. He would politicize the appointment process of judges like no other predecessor. Yes, FDR tried to pack the court, but when I looked at what he had done, I looked at what Roosevelt had done, there was remarkable diversity of the judges he did put on the bench. They weren't all cookie cutters who had been tested by having sat on particularly an appellate court where their decision-making range of thinking was pretty clear. So, in addition to lining up potential judges, because, as I say, there could be 2, maybe 3 appointments on the High Court at any time, they need to begin to look at exactly what they would do with the presidency. Dick Cheney, as those of you who have followed this presidency know, his tremendous influence. I didn't know Dick when he was in the Nixon White House. He was working for Don Rumsfeld, who I did know, and he was sort of below the radar. But he did come back to Washington with a clear agenda, and he's largely succeeded in so many ways in changing the operations of the presidency. One of his, not detractors, but somebody who's worked with him very closely, Congresswoman Jane Harman of the House Intelligence Committee, who was the ranking member for a long time and had worked with Cheney throughout the Bush administration, said, you know, John, I think these people are convinced they're still fighting Watergate because Dick Cheney has just never accepted that the president gave up the powers he gave up. They would start before actually Watergate became a big issue with the war powers, right on down through particularly things like executive privilege and protecting the powers and expanding the powers of the president in a way we've never seen, relying on the war powers, the commander-in-chief power, as no president since extreme emergencies with the Civil War, Korea, earlier than that, FDR, pushing that envelope, but always going to Congress to try to get some sort of ratification, whereas this president just takes it for granted that he is, in essence, an elected monarch when it comes to matters of war and peace. So that's certainly going to be one of the areas that has to be focused on, and I've just touched a few, but at the core of all this is the separation of powers. It's the genius of our system. It has been the strength of our system. I've seen it operate myself when, during Watergate, the Congress finally had enough. Sam Ervin and Peter Badino leading the way slowly but steadily and deciding to level the playing field. Cheney had the reaction, of course, that the Congress had expressed and exercised too many powers. That's not true. All they did was level the playing field, and that's the way it should be. So those are broad issues that this president, next president, must think about. I've heard one candidate so far address that, and it was Hillary Clinton who was asked a flat-out question. What would you do with all the assumed powers that the Bush and Cheney administration are now exercising? And she was very frank. She said, first thing I would do would be to go in and start repealing them. As close as I can find in the literature and the campaign speeches of Barack Obama is that he was pressed in Philadelphia by a very seasoned journalist who thought about this issue and said, what would you do with issues like potential war crimes or the violations of FISA or the use of torture? And Obama gave, I thought, a very thoughtful and precedent-breaking answer. He said, one of the first things I would do is have my Attorney General, in fact, he used the word immediately, investigate as to whether this is a distorted policy that they have been using or a blatant violation of the law. Now, we can all hope that indeed he follows that up, because that indeed would start to bring the presidency back within some boundaries. As we've gone far beyond the Nixon imperial presidency, we literally have a plebiscitary president who every 4 years seeks ratification and in between does pretty much what he wants to do when he thinks he can get away with it, because he's found that Congress has lost his spine. If McCain is elected, I will have more to say about that, but I can't this morning. But just hang on, in about 10 days, I'll be back in Washington, which might give you a hint where I'll have it to say. But anyway, there's no question that